Good morning, it's Thursday, July 30, and this is the Brussels Playbook podcast. The vibe in Brussels today is anticipatory. The summer may not be over, but officials are already racing to give Ursula von der Leyen something substantial to announce in September. Also on the pod, Brussels is getting sweeping new powers to police the AI behind ChatGPT, Claude and Gemini. And industrial chicken farms may be accelerating the spread of diarrhea-causing bacteria. What a delicious way of starting the day. Sorry, folks, for those having their breakfast. I'm Zoya Sheftalovich, and with me today is Sarah Wheaton, one of our policy editors. Hey, Sarah. Diarrhea-causing bacteria, huh?
I mean, this is life as the agri-editor.
Every day is a diarrhea-causing bacteria day.
Or it's farmers shooting manure and potatoes into Schumann Square day. You know, variety is the spice of life.
Well, Sarah, let's start with a bit of a look ahead to the State of the European Union speech that Ursula von der Leyen will be giving on September 16. This is the big set-piece speech that she gives every year, or that the European Commission President gives every year, where they basically set out their priorities for the year ahead. They flag policy proposals that are going to be coming. They sort of give a sense to people after they've returned from the summer about what's going to be the real work of the coming year. And so we've got a bit of a preview in today's Brussels Playbook via our colleague Gabriel Gavin, who's been speaking with the officials who are racing to put together what's going into this speech for essentially what those priorities are going to be. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, so everybody is watching September 16th to see what Ursula von der Leyen says. And, you know, the most obviously voter-friendly idea is tougher action on children and social media. So the Commission President has already promised to act on this, but officials are still working out what that would actually mean in practice.
Yeah, we've been talking about this on the podcast on a few occasions, and this is a question of, okay, what will the EU do to standardize how kids are able to use social media? Will it ban kids under 13 from using it entirely? Will it have some sort of stepped kind of parental permission situation? Will it be an under 15 ban, under 16? All sorts of models are under consideration. And that's something that the Commission is going to determine really this summer. So that's a big one. What else is on the agenda?
Well, another thing is the European security strategy. And this is bigger than it sounds. It's not just sort of defense in the traditional sense. It's also looking at things like cyber attacks, sabotage, disinformation, threats to critical infrastructure. Also, you know, something we've been talking about here, economic coercion, another country using trade or technology dependence as political pressure.
And when I hear that, I'm hearing, you know, China with its rare earths ban when it stopped allowing companies around the world access to those rare earths, and Europe suffered, the US suffered. But of course, the US maybe
also,
too.
Yeah, you know, how is Europe going to be able to stick to its tech regs that Washington doesn't like and can use trade as a threat?
Yeah, and of course there's the EU budget, the multi-annual financial framework, the MFF. Now that's this 2 trillion. I was about to say billion, and then I was like, nope, that's a B, not a T. It's a almost 2 trillion budget for the 7 years from 2028 to 2035. And this thing we've been talking about for months. It's very controversial. There's one camp that wants more money, more spending, and spending on the more traditional EU priorities, roads, bridges, poorer regions, agriculture. You know all about that. Then there's another camp which is very vociferously and loudly currently being led by Germany, saying absolutely not more money, absolutely not.
Indeed, yeah. Chancellor Friedrich Merz reiterated that he does not want to see that budget be 2 trillion in the end. He met this week with Irish Prime Minister Micheál Martin, and he said the Commission's proposal is unbalanced and unaffordable. He wants it cut by several hundred billion euros across all areas of spending. And he was also really not a fan of this proposal to earn more money for the EU.
Well, this is something that I'm really closely following. It's something that I've been talking about. I mean, even the last few days, it might seem like Brussels is empty, but the MFF discussion continues, Sarah, and I've been having some lunches and some coffees, and the own resources is what it's called. It's where essentially the EU is able to raise money of its own by taxing certain things or getting customs duties, things like that. Now, there are a bunch of proposals on the table. I think there are something like 8 of them where the Commission has to sift through them and figure out, okay, what is palatable? What will countries get on board with? Probably more than one, because one of the things that's really important from the Council perspective and from the Commission perspective is ensuring that multiple countries bear the burden. And it's not just, if you only have one proposal, one particular country's industry might be taxed more heavily than another's. So this is a really, really big one, this question of own resources. In any case, whatever it is that goes into the speech, there are lots of parties around town who are trying to influence those policymakers and make sure that their priorities are actually in there and making sure that, that the speech touches on what they care about. So it's all up for grabs, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, von der Leyen isn't just going to be thinking about her coalition in Brussels. She is going to be making this speech ahead of important national elections next year. Populist parties are arguing that Brussels is failing to deliver, and so she's going to have to show EU citizens as well who, probably are not going to pay that much attention to this speech, but the policies that she proposes are going to be pretty critical.
Yeah, and it's no surprise that, for instance, the children's social media ban thing is a big priority because, of course, one of those key elections is France. France is one of the countries that's at the vanguard of this child social media ban movement. Emmanuel Macron just announced a ban recently. So I think there are these sorts of domestic concerns and considerations that are going into this speech.
Yeah, and can I actually just share a pro tip, a very self-serving pro tip?
Yes, please.
That I got I used to cover lobbying, and one very smart lobbyist told me that this kind of summer slow period is actually the most cost-effective time to advertise, to give your sponsor message in Brussels playbook, because the only people sticking around town are the bureaucrats who are working on the State of the European Union address. So if you have something you want in there, sponsor playbook, sponsor this podcast. As I said, very
Sarah,
self-serving.
You have just done that so naturally. I had no idea this was an option for us to be spruiking our own selves. Actually, I wouldn't mind hearing from folks out there in podcast land. What would you like to hear Ursula von der Leyen mention in her speech? Tell us. Let us know. Number is in the show notes.
Don't have to pay to leave a comment.
All right, Sarah, as of this weekend, did you know that the EU's AI office is getting big time new powers, which will essentially allow it to regulate these AI assistants, the ChatGPTs, Claudes, Geminis, etc., more effectively? Or that's the plan anyway.
It hadn't really been on my radar, but this is actually one of these moments that we see Brussels start to exert some of the influence over big tech that we so often hear debated.
Yeah, so from this Sunday, actually, these powers come into play. So this AI office, it's been around for a few years, but it's kind of had like a weird status, and it's got a relatively small team, hasn't had that much teeth when it comes to regulation. But now this specialist team, it exists inside DG Connect. The specialist team is going to be getting some pretty powerful, big new bazookas because of the EU's AI Act. And basically what they can now do is they can demand information from these AI companies, AI makers. They can test their models, and they can essentially force those companies to address any serious risks that they might find. And there's some pretty significant fines as well. So you can get fined up to 3% of global turnover if you've got major issues with your AI models and you don't address them.
Yeah, and look, the EU gets criticized for moving slowly, but they're actually kind of benefiting from the timing of this right now, because we just saw this shocking story about an open AI system kind of escaping its testing ground and hacking into a real company during what was supposed to be a safety test.
Yeah, the very not aptly named Hugging Face. Oh, gosh. This story has been brewing. Now, it has been very interesting to see the conversation around the potential dangers of AI. And that's exactly the sort of danger that Brussels wants the companies that are behind these systems to deal with before something goes really wrong. Because in this case, this was an experiment that OpenAI was running. And yes, things went wrong, but ultimately it was kind of under control. But you just don't know what's happening once these things are out in the wild.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of political pressure now for the Commission to actually use these powers. There was an open letter from AI experts, researchers, think tanks, and they want to see this AI office actually act fast and not wait for things like this hugging face scandal to happen.
Yeah, the problem is there's less than 40 people working in this AI safety team, which is meant to be assessing these models. And, they're commission officials. They've got kind of legal and policy expertise. I mean, some of them have technical expertise, but they're up against billion euro American and Chinese firms that have some of the best paid engineers on board. So trying to assess this very complex technology, that's going to be tricky for such a small team. But nonetheless, they're going to have to do it. Sarah, third story, and this one's on you, baby, because I don't know that much about large-scale chicken farming and certainly not what they've got to do with diarrhea.
Okay, well, basically, germs. They start out in wild birds and they end up in domesticated birds. And look, this is a little bit the same thing that we saw with COVID, that we've seen with so many other viruses, that they jump from wild animals to animals that have contact with humans. And in this case, basically, a study that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences studied almost 2,800 bacterial genomes from wild birds and domesticated chickens in 30 countries over 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so big study. And they just basically found that these chicken farms provide the perfect conditions for bacteria to spread, mix, and develop new traits. And then they get passed on to people.
And I mean, presumably it's not such a big deal. You cook the chicken, that kills the bacteria. Or is there more to it than that?
Look, you cook the chicken, it kills the bacteria. But people are not perfect. We're sloppy. You got the chicken juices running everywhere. They end up on your counter. They end up on something that you're eating raw. And, you end up ingesting this bug called Campylobacter. It's not going to kill you, but it's going to give you the runs.
I want to be running out of here right now. This feels too real for this time in the morning for us to be talking about it. I'm not one to be squeamish, but it's a bit too much for me. In any case, the issue is also antibiotic resistance, right? As I understand it. I mean, part of the thing is that this is thriving now.
Exactly. I mean, with all these hosts to live in, this bug can start resisting antibiotics. And this is kind of a broader problem in both health policy and agriculture policy, that these life-saving medicines that make things like Campylobacter be just kind of a minor annoyance can eventually lead to superbugs that resist everything. So the argument from this study is basically that these mega farms, some of them have more than 1 million chickens. The study is raising concern that this is causing kind of bigger long-term problems. And the main hotspots for these farms in Europe are Spain, Italy, France, and Poland. So this isn't just kind of one of those things where you can be like, oh, that's a problem that a different part of the world with lower safety standards has.
Interesting. It's worth noting that in an interview with our agri reporter, Katrin Yochetova, who wrote this story, that the main poultry lobbying group in Europe, AVEC, was a bit skeptical of the study. They said, look, there is an important issue here, but they reckon that the study doesn't actually compare production systems, farm sizes, stocking densities, or biosecurity standards. And so they reckon you can't really come to the conclusion that modern European poultry farming is the cause of this. But, we'll see.
Cook your chicken, wipe your counter.
Yeah.
Just basic hygiene is important.
Yeah. And if you get the runs, don't
run away from me.
Don't tell me about it. Hey, Sarah, what's on the weekender tomorrow?
Well, we go from superbugs to wildfires. We are talking with an expert panel of our colleagues about the toll that this is taking. Basically, heat domes, fire-fueled lightning strikes, and all sorts of other things out of the inferno are now hitting Europe. But there will be an optimistic note. We'll talk about how the humble goat could actually be the best fire prevention tool. So.
I can't believe you get to talk about goats and I don't. I wanted goats on my bingo card of animal discussions on the Brussels Playbook podcast. It's very unfair.
You can have a follow-up discussion on Monday morning.
What kind of a noise does a goat make?
No, I'm not falling for that one. Sorry. I'm sure it sounds very similar to a peacock.
And we know that those sound almost exactly the same as a llama. Hey, meanwhile, Sarah, I don't know if you were listening to the podcast yesterday, but we had an interesting discussion on the Montenegrin language and the fact that the EU is now hiring Montenegrin translators to help with the accession treaty of Montenegro. By the way, we did have some funny responses to our WhatsApp with people saying, hey, I'd like that job, please. Thank you. But we also had a really interesting note from a professor of linguistics at the University of Montenegro, Igor Lakic. And he had this to say. He said, Serbian, Montenegrin, Croatian and Bosnian are linguistically one language. The similarities among the four are more than 95%. It is easy to tell which is which when you hear someone speak, but we understand everyone no matter which country they come from. But he added this super interesting point because in the different legal systems, there are different terminologies. And if you consider the fact that there's all of these different references that people have that are specific to their knowledge of the politics, economy, and other characteristics of a particular country, it's actually kind of reasonable that you would have maybe 4 booths translating for different people because they will understand different things from what is being said.
It's a very interesting cultural point. I would be curious to see a cost estimate for this cultural fidelity.
Well, we shall see. We'll probably find out. See what those own resources can pay for. All right, folks, that's it from me this week. Have a lovely weekend. Listen to The Weekender. Rate us, review us. See you soon.
Uncovered windows can make your home feel up to 20 degrees hotter. Stay cool and save up to 45% off custom window treatments during the summer Black Friday mega sale at Blinds.com. From outdoor shades to room darkening blinds, finding the perfect fit is easy. Get free samples, expert design help, and professional measure and install services, or DIY with confidence and support every step of the way. Shop up to 45% off site-wide, plus huge savings on doorbusters right now during the summer Black Friday mega sale at Blinds.com.